So a new update has come out on the monster manual, and this one is going to be Aberrations and Oozes. And I mean, it sounds kind of grotesque when you think about Aberrations and Oozes, but they're some of the most varied monsters in the book, and some of the, I want to say most used, but that might just be my campaign. So they're a lot of fun. Let's see what changes that you're going to talk about.
Our favorite icky creatures, the Aberrations. This is, again, like kind of a cornerstone of Dungeons and Dragons. Some of our big heavy hitters, like Mind Flayers and Beholders, belong to this kind of gooey category.
And I think, as always with one of these categories, especially one that doesn't have sort of a self-explanatory name, it's good to pause for a moment and talk about what do we even mean when we say aberration. Because when we say dragon, well, people know what dragons are.
Yeah.
But when we did our video on monstrosities, we needed to talk about what the heck does D&D mean by a monstrosity. In some ways, I feel we have to even more pause with aberration, because this is a loaded word. I mean, it means ick. And so why, even though there are icky monsters in other categories, and those other icky monsters are not called aberrations.
Icky.
So what we specifically mean
We're in the third
when
grade
we
now.
put
Icky.
a creature into this category is either this is an icky creature that comes from the far realm, which is that realm in the D&D multiverse that is beyond the Great Wheel. It defies the laws of the rest of the multiverse. And in fact, if the far realm were to succeed at opening up and truly gaining dominance in the multiverse, the rest of the multiverse would collapse. It is this force that terrifies even devils and demons. It is, in a way, almost beyond good and evil, even though we code most of it as evil.
Yeah.
It is so alien that most mortal minds could not even wrap their head around how anything thinks in the far realm.
And that's the thing that makes it scary.
Yes, it is that unknowable quality to so much of it. And so aberrations are either creatures from the far realm, or creatures that popped out of the far realm and have been in the multiverse for a while, or it's someone who has been created or altered by something from the far realm. And so it's because of that range that, sure, there are some malevolent creatures in this category, especially the ones who are directly connected to the far realm, but we also have a few benevolent creatures in this category. The flump, for instance, is in this category. I like to think that with the flump, that even the flump on some level its thinking is unknowable, meaning it has a cheerful benevolence. And we've all probably met people like this before, where this cheerful benevolence is unknowable.
Yeah.
Like it seems to defy all reality. And so in some ways, I just feel like the flump represents a different extreme from the far realm than, say, an aboleth or a mind flayer. When it comes to creatures who have been shaped in some way by the far realm, people, when they open up the new monster manual, are going to discover some new members of the aberration category. The two most prominent being the Githyanki and the Githzerai.
Yeah.
We already showed that we were going to do this in the Planescape book that you led. And we did this because we really wanted to drive home for people in the game design itself that Githzerai and Githyanki aren't simply people who happen to live in the astral sea.
Yeah.
Like they were a people who were completely transformed by the Illithid generations ago, and they have their own section in the monster manual because they have been transformed so much that they have all of these psionic powers. They live in an environment that would be mind-blowing to most people's.
Right.
I mean, because they live in a place where time does not pass. where just that very concept is, many of our brains would sort of blue screen for a while to process that. And so if people are wondering, why now are Githyanki and Githzerai in this category? And again, this evolution actually started back in Planescape. It's because they are way beyond humanoid. They are something else. And then in contrast, people, when they look at the new monster manual, are actually going to find a few creatures that used to be humanoids that have now actually been absorbed into our NPC stat blocks. For instance, orcs now, and you can find this on a table at the back of the book, are still in the book, and you'll see them in the art, but they're actually represented by the host of NPC stat blocks we have. Because orcs, like humans and dwarves and elves, are all part of the humanoid family, and we typically represent.
So one of the things they did was get rid of the half races. So for the orcs to be in the NPC section makes a lot of sense, because you can't be a half orc now. You can only be an orc. So cool, whatever. I don't agree with Githyanki's being an aberration, but you know, they're the creators, I guess. They're going to continue making these weird decisions, these wild leaps in logic, and then being changed, altered in some way by the Illithid. Sure, that's lore accurate, but that doesn't necessarily make them aberrations as far as the definition of aberrations go. But I mean, I don't understand why they did it. I would lie to you and say that I do, but I don't. I don't understand why they did it, and I don't fully agree with it, but it doesn't change anything as a whole. You can still throw them in and continue using them like you've been using them in the past regardless. So I guess it doesn't really matter, but it's just weird to me.
Humanoids with our huge variety of NPC stat blocks. Whereas creatures that maybe used to be in the humanoid category, where we've moved them into a brand new category, we not only have changed their type, but then we have typically amped up what is otherworldly about them. So you see that here for this, for today's topic, aberrations. You'll see that with Githyanki and Githzerai, that again, they are way beyond just the baker down the street.
Absolutely. And part of what works for these species as being aberrations, when it's like, all right, well, a Githyanki and a Githzerai, little different than a beholder, little different than this tentacled monstrosity. Part of what makes them aberrations is that they've been affected by the mind flayers at such a fundamental level that there's something unnatural about them. They're being manipulated.
Big green
even
frog
still.
people, of course they're unnatural.
So the idea that these whole species still might have some agenda, still might have some role in the mind flayer greater.
So every species has a role to some extent, right? Githyanki tend to not really ally themselves with mind flayers because of the things mind flayers have done to them in the past. Yeah, they're big, ugly, green frog people without actually looking like frogs, right? But it doesn't, just because they're ugly doesn't mean they're aberrations. By that logic, you should be making the orcs aberrations because they're ugly too. No, I don't know. Maybe I'm harping too much on this.
Planned, that's coded into their existence. That's part of what makes them unlike other species of the multiverse.
And for those that don't know, what is the defining kind of like separation between Githyanki and Githzerai?
So the Githyanki and the Githzerai used to be a single people. They were the Gith. But then there was not only the horrific genetic experiments of the mind flayers that went on with them, but then a civil war among the people where half of them followed Vlakath, the Lich Queen, into the astral plane, where they also then allied with red dragons, and in a way almost were like part of this theocracy with this lich at the head of it. Whereas the others, who came to be known as the Githzerai, they fled into the plane of limbo, where they then entered a life of meditation, and their response to what had been done to them was very different than creating this sort of militaristic theocratic order.
And they might even be a little more aware that there's something that's going on with them and are actually focusing on their own mental development, psionics, element, discipline, to make sure that if something does get triggered, they're not just going to be tools of the mind flayers again.
And we don't have to do a massive deep dive, but the mind flayers are one of those unknowable intelligences. But this is one of those unknowable intelligences that has an empire and a set goal that no one knows. It's that great plan. What is this plan? Not specifically what it is, but like it's referenced. We always reference it as that storm cloud brewing overhead for all characters in D&D.
So the great plan of the Mind Flayers is similar to the Day of Mourning in Eberron, where it is something that everyone knows about. Either in the case of people in Eberron know the Day of Mourning happened, and now there's this Mournland, this devastated place, but no one knows exactly what happened.
Right.
Similar with the Mind Flayer Empire and its great plan, people know it's there.
Right.
People know the mind flayers have been orchestrating things both out in the open and behind the scenes to take over the multiverse. But people do not know all of the ways in which mind flayers have done it, all of the ways in which, it appears in many cases that the mind flayers have been defeated, but then you see them rise up again someplace else. We have seen this in recent D&D books like Phandelver and Below, The Shattered Obelisk, discovering that those obelisks that had been appearing for years in our adventures were a part of the Great Plan. And also what's even scarier is the Great Plan isn't just in the material plane, it's also in other planes of existence. And so this is not just a storm cloud coming, it's almost like a whole planet that's about to crash. It's imagine if we looked up on Earth into the sky and saw, it looks like Mars is about to crash into Earth. It's that scale. Like if the whole plan is ever allowed to come together, whole worlds would fall.
Right.
And this is why mind flayers, as well as aboleths and beholders to a lesser extent, have not only been viewed as multiversal threats throughout the history of D&D, but also a number of these far realm creatures are viewed as also enemies of the gods.
Or in a way backwards ass city where they're pretending to help, mind flayers could be viewed as gods. Look, mind flayers are really cool. I love mind flayers. Anything illithid is really cool. In Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, they came out with a mind flayer dragon. It's the slime puppy. That's what I will always call it. They're cool. They've got great lore for great backstory. They are intelligent. They've got psionic abilities. They can pretend to be a good guy to win over a city. Stuff like that. It's cool. It's great that they're doing all this stuff. I don't know why they felt the need to bring on Aberron. That Aberron was not like a good comparison to what the illithids want, but it is what it is. Once again, it's their decisions. The Mind Flayers are, in my opinion, one of the best enemy races, I guess I'll call it, to be able to throw into any campaign, and they'll fit to some extent. You don't have to build a campaign around them like you do with like an Archlich, So they're cool. They're cool. But everybody knows them.
Because these creatures, these far realm creatures, in some ways view themselves beyond gods.
Yeah, they do.
And gods are almost in their alien minds, this sort of silly thing that other creatures require. And even sometimes they are referred to having gods of their own, but you have to think of sort of when an aberration has a god, you have to remember the baseline is they think of themselves as being equal to gods. So if they're worshiping something that they think of as a god, is like their god is like beyond gods.
Yeah.
Because they they don't view themselves as just, oh, we're just another type of person. Like, they don't even have a sense of personhood the way people from the rest of the D&D multiverse have. I sometimes will see, people refer to, well, mind flayers are people too.
No,
and it's like, well, you might want to check with them because they don't think of themselves as people the way we as humans do. Particularly because they have a hive mind, they are in a way, they have a style of sapience that is completely different from humans and other humanoid creatures.
And we've had examples of rogue mind flayers here and there in very specific works of fiction. To give people an example of a mind flayer that has freed themselves, but that is far and few between.
The rogue mind flayers are the rare exception that prove the rule.
Right.
The fact that it's a big deal that this mind flayer, has figured out it likes cake, and that's
Yeah.
Look, rogue mind flayers are awesome as well, but they're really difficult to flesh out as far as NPCs go. The best example I've ever seen of a rogue mind flayer is Critical Role, the podcast of Vox Machina. It's so campaign 1 in the beginning, Matt does this. He makes a rogue mind flayer and he fleshes it out really good. He voices it really good. It's a fantastic example of what a rogue mind flayer should be, all the way down to the extent that it's wants to fight against the hive mind. But they are rare, so it's not anything that you'll ever really see too much or even be able to work in easily to any campaign. But they are so difficult to flesh out because they're a hive mind, because they're basically zealots for whatever who is controlling the hive mind at that point in time. So they're fun, they're a neat idea, but they're so difficult to do.
That's
It's a revelation.
It's like a silly example, but that should tell you how alien they are, because each of us as humans, it's just run of the mill that we each have thousands, if not more than thousands, of individual preferences that coalesce into who we are. The fact that it's notable that there was a mind flayer out of billions, if not trillions, of mind flayers in existence that figured out it likes a thing. Again, that really drives home they are not like us.
Yeah, because now that one's been infected with material plainness. It's a problem.
Yeah.
A lot of this is also pretty heady. This is the place for your cosmic horror plots, your Lovecraftian plots. But even though we're talking a lot about all of this, we really want DMs to play with this. This is something where even though we have ideas for what we might do down the road, don't wait for us. You don't need our permission, but you absolutely have permission. Go play with what these secrets are. Make these parts of your...
The problem with that is they made mind flayers some of the most complex and complicated monsters in any of the monster manuals. They are difficult to create a backstory for beyond what's already been made. They're difficult to create a goal for because the only thing that really comes to mind for a goal for any hive mind is complete, multiplanar, taking over the entirety of all of the planes that they can get their tentacles on, right? And that's so simple, it's so basic, it's so blah, So yeah, everyone should at least at one point in their dungeon mastering career attempt to have a good story for some mind flayers, but it is hard. It is difficult. I've had a hard time. I know a lot of my friends have had a hard time doing it. Mind flayers are complex, complicated race of hive-minded people, and that makes it really difficult to come up with new secrets, come up with new ideas or grand designs for the mind flayers, for illithids as a whole. So it's rough. They're fun, they're cool, but trying to come up with stuff on your own for such a complicated and complex race is rough. It is. I do recommend trying. It's a lot of fun to try, but it's also frustrating.
campaigns, develop your own stories and mysteries about them.
An element too that is far less heady is there are new stat blocks in here, yo. And so
Wild.
and
New
so,
stat
you know,
blocks in
like
here,
with
yo.
the Githyanki, right away people are going to see one of the new types of Githyanki is the Githyanki Dracomancer.
Yeah.
And here we've created a Githyanki that really leans into the connection that the Githyanki have traditionally had with red dragons. And so if you want a CR16 Githyanki Dracomancer to show up and just wreck things,
Yeah.
here you go. And similarly with Githzerai, we now have a trio of options, the Monk, the Zerth, and the Scion, that, just as we've done in the Githyanki, show a range of power levels as well as a nice range of different game capabilities so that DMs will be able to populate a Gith or otherwise aberration-themed campaign or adventure with even more monsters that have been tailored for that style.
I just realized when we were talking about the Mind Flayer bit, I feel like one of the best examples of that in cinema is Dark City. It's very Mind Flayer coded, that entire film, really.
Yeah, I often, again, love seeing those twists with these characters. I mean, we see it in Baldur's Gate 3 with the Mind Flayers, but again, what I always think is
They work because they're rare.
the exception proves the rule. My one caution when DMs, you know, take the reins and do what they want with these creatures is just a reminder is if every monster just ends up
Being your friend.
being a human
Yeah.
basically in a monster suit, that actually takes away some of the specialness of the different types of creatures.
Yeah.
Because one of the things about especially this monster manual that has over 500 stat blocks for you to play with is they don't just represent different gameplay possibilities, they represent different existential possibilities. I mean, we have creatures in here that, again, like the aberrations, many of them are from beyond the stars, and we can't even comprehend how they think and feel. There are, you know, angels and fiends that live, you know, unless something gets in the way, can potentially live forever and are embodiments of certain moral ideals, and so many other creatures that really get at part of why fantasy storytelling can be so exciting, because you can, in fantasy, engage with creatures that just would not be conceivable in our world, creatures that see reality entirely differently from how we do, who think and feel differently from how we do. And part of, I think, the magic of the stories is when then the human or the human stand-in, if it's, you know, another type of humanoid, has to either build bridges with one of these creatures, or often, as in the case with aberrations, has to try to stop them because they are trying to draw the whole world into their realm of eyeballs, tentacles, and goop.
This is an entire creature type where a DM can look at these creatures and be like, I don't understand its motivation, and have that partially be like, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
Good. That's probably good for you.
Yeah.
And something I loved, by the way, in Baldur's Gate 3, not only, we've already talked about Mind Flayers in Baldur's Gate 3, but actually what I loved about the portrayal of Lae'zel and the other Githyanki is this otherness really came through.
Yeah.
Again, Lae'zel ends up having one of my favorite story arcs in the game as you see her build these connections with the mortal creatures in the group. But the game...
I don't know. You guys are gonna have to tell me about that in the comments, because every time I've played Baldur's Gate, every playthrough, Lae'zel gets murdered in the camp. So, yeah. I don't know. I did like Lae'zel as a character as far as Gith go. I think she was a really good representation of the Githyanki. But she was also like, I don't know, she was rough, but I guess she's supposed to be rough because the Gith are kind of an odd race. They're an odd people, so I guess it makes sense, but I don't know. I think we could stop bringing up Baldur's Gate in this video. It would be probably best bet for them, because then we're all going to get distracted and not listen to what they're saying, because Baldur's Gate's so much more interesting than what they have to say.
He never loses sight of the fact that Lizelle is from a realm where time does not pass, where her whole people have been given mind powers by the very tentacled creatures that they're going up against, and no matter how much you might be able to relate with her and how wonderfully moving at points her story is, she's from literally another world.
Besides the damage the Mind Flayers have done, they also have things like the Grimlock, other creatures that they've influenced. Let's talk about the Kuo-toa, because they've always been really fascinating to me, because they have such powerful belief sometimes in the lore that they can cause things to be true that are not true.
Yes.
Right, like, in previous editions, the Kuo-toa can actually believe so strongly that something is a god that it just kind of is a god, because they have that kind of, again, that alien nature. Tell me about the Kuo-toa. I love using them and everything.
They too are now aberrations.
Yeah.
Because we realized that they are certainly not humanoid. And I mean, you just look at the picture and that's clear.
Yeah.
But also in terms of their story, they too are wholly other and have an agenda that really is not like what you would typically expect from humanoids. Often humanoids are kind of different flavors of what we would think of as human.
Yeah.
And often when we think of moving a creature that maybe previously had been categorized as humanoid into another category, we're often looking at the fantasy of that creature. And part of it is like, what is their physical makeup, but even more importantly is what is their mythic makeup? What is their role in the multiverse? What are they after? How were they created? And that often is what influences what category the creature ends up in. And the Kuo-toa, their goals are largely centered on reshaping reality, making their own gods, and doing whatever it is they're doing out down at the bottom of the sea, or deep in the Underdark. And I'm purposefully being mysterious about whatever it is they're doing, because in a way, any aberration that you pick, with, again, maybe the exceptions of the ones who might befriend you, like the Gith or the Flumph. Most of them, part of their mystique is no one but the DM ultimately knows what are they up to and why are they doing it.
Yeah.
And
At the time, the DM doesn't know
decision
either.
they make about a particular group of Kuo-toa or a particular Mind Flayer doesn't even have to be true for all of them, because you might find that one cell of Kuo-toa has a completely different set of bizarre goals from another set of Kuo-toa. And again, that to me is what makes them so fascinating as monsters.
Well, and in the Kuo-toa's case, that's very likely. They're not empire builders. There's not some great Kuo-toa agenda. Every different group of Kuo-toa that you run into probably has different agendas, different bizarre beliefs, all of that. And that's part of what makes these fish creatures just so, what's the deal with them? They're just all a little off.
Weirdly enough, my inspiration for Kuo-toa is the movie Midsummer on some level.
Well, and when it comes to stat blocks, the Kuo-toa section has also expanded.
Okay, so I gotta ask. Do you pronounce it Kuo-toa or Koa-toa? I've always pronounced it Koa-toa. And Jeremy here is outnumbered here 2-1 in this little interview, but he keeps saying Kuo-toa, and that sounds wrong to me. So, I mean, it's a race of fish people, so I don't use them too often. They get used a lot whenever I'm in the water, but they're also kind of boring to me. But what do you think? How do you pronounce it? Do you pronounce it as a U or an O? Let me know in the comments.
So that it now has the baseline Kuo-toa. We have a stat block for the Kuo-toa whip and a full stat block for the Kuo-toa monitor, as well as the Kuo-toa archpriest. Because before we had one of those cases where we had a sidebar where it was customize this other stat block to get this other type of Kuo-toa. now we've built it out for you so that
Good.
you get the 4 full stat blocks to play with.
Good.
I don't know why I love them so much. I started doing all of them with Tom Waits accents for some reason. It felt appropriate.
Whenever I do them, I give them the voice of, oh my gosh, what was his name? It was the fish guy from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Oh my God, I don't remember that
Merman.
voice.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do that bubbly voice.
They're Murlocs from World of Warcraft. Just give them the Murloc voice. It's fine.
Probably,
They
yeah.
all sound like that.
I just went the other. I was just like,
So, what do you guys want to do today? Make a god.
just real gravelly. Like Koto that smoke way too
Exactly, I
much.
was about to say, they're smoking a
They're
lot.
smoking a lot.
down there.
They just bob their heads up above water and vape. So we have a lot of really classic creatures. We have, amongst the aberrations, we also have one of the most unique personalities in D&D history. We have the Beholder. I love messing with Beholders so much. Beholders have nightmares that can become true. That is part of their gestation sometimes. They think they are the most important thing in the universe. They're so fun. I wouldn't say they're relatable, but they have personalities that we can all agree not to like. Tell me more about Beholders.
So the Beholder has returned now with all of its eye rays fine-tuned. So what people are going to discover is that some of the eye ray options now are more dangerous than they were before, because something that we fine-tuned in the Beholder is, because this is one of the rare creatures where the typical way you DM a Beholder is you roll a die and it just randomly determines which eye ray is shot off. We wanted to make sure that on average, the eye rays were delivering the Beholder's challenge rating, which was not something we assured as thoroughly a decade ago. And so this time we wanted to do a better job of making it so.
Fun fact, I don't know a single DM who used the eye roll or the die roll to decide which eye ray was being used. I sure as hell didn't. All my DM friends that I talked to, they never did. It was a fun little gimmick that you could do if you wanted to be random, but like it doesn't make sense for an intelligent creature like a Beholder to just willy-nilly randomly pick one of its eye stalks to shoot a beam out of, right? So I don't know anyone who legitimately used the die roll to decide which eye beam to use. That we picked which one made sense for the occasion, and that was that. It was that simple. So I don't know. It's cool that by the sounds of it, they're getting rid of the die roll, which is cool, but ultimately unnecessary. Because, like I said, I don't know anyone who actually legitimately did it. When people did it, they were doing it ironically. So I don't know.
So that whether you're choosing eye rays or rolling randomly, which is what we recommend, because that kind of gets at that really unknowable consciousness side of the Beholder that not even the DM knows what the Beholder is going to do.
No.
That you're going to find that on average, whatever gets produced from those die rolls is going to tend toward keeping this Beholder terrifying and on its CR.
Why is this such a, and I say iconic, I guess pun intended, but why are they so iconic to D&D? And we also have variations kind of
friggin' cool.
Beholder kin.
I mean, well, the Beholder has been with us since the first edition Monster Manual.
Yeah.
It was this wonderfully odd creature that appeared right there in the first monster, hardbound monster book for D&D.
Also behind Wes right now, licking the back of his
absolutely.
head.
trying to chomp on us. And again, just the oddity of it, this creature with these eye stalks that is really just a floating head, and there's nothing else there. Because you can, just looking at the Beholder, you can see this thing does not function like anything in nature.
Yes.
I mean, because it has a big mouth. Well, if it eats, where it go? And there are so many things about the Beholder where if you think about it long enough,
I
it's
don't like this.
this creature really defies anything natural. all these different exciting eye rays. And then, yes, we have also the spectator in the book as a sort of lesser beholder, so that if the DM wants to have a little bit of beholderness in their game, they can at a lower level, because the standard beholder is challenge rating 13, so for pretty high level characters. But then also in the undead category, we have the death tyrant.
The Death Tyrant's the coolest
so
one.
if you want, some beholderness,
Yeah.
but you want to have it more of a, spooky flavor, well, we've got you covered there as well.
The Beholder's also one of these fantastic monsters that even from the first edition monster manual, you're going through, okay, it's a chimera, okay, it's a hydra. I understand these monsters, I get them, I've read stories about them before, but then you get hit with something like the Beholder, and it's like, I don't know what this is. What's the story behind it? If it's here, it has to be as rich as these other ones. It's one of the fantastic things about monster manuals, bestiaries in general, is just that sense of wonder, where it's just like, what is this? What's the possibility for stories?
You always kind of
Learning all
remember the
about
first time you send a beholder after people who are new to D&D. You only have so many firsts of meeting a beholder or spacer beast and some of these creatures, because they're just like, I've never seen this in Game of Thrones. Like,
Yes.
like there's no corollary to this creature in any way. That uniqueness of D&D.
Yeah.
There's interesting lore bits that I think some people, maybe you even don't know about beholders. Why don't beholders like watching games?
Do we have to do this?
We do.
Why?
Well, because most games are spectator sports.
See, I just took psychic damage.
This is
Can
what
you
we
tell
were
I made this
talking
one up myself?
This is what we were talking about. It's like, I don't understand the motivation. I don't understand why this is happening. I'm uncomfortable with it. Thanks for revealing your creature type.
I'm all tentacles, chest down.
I believe it.
You have no proof I have legs. I'm so sorry. I'm not. I love it. I love the torture of it. What else? We've got some.
That does introduce an interesting existential question. If someone has only ever seen us in videos,
Yeah,
they don't know what's
don't.
below here.
I've avoided it for years. It's been like,
It's time for me to confess. I'm a mermaid.
what lore monster half does everyone on staff have? Like, who's a spider?
What a good random table for the next monster manual.
We've got some other fantastic aberrations. We have the aboleth, which
Yep.
is, again, one of these kind of strange, unknowable agenda creatures that live under the ocean.
Aboleths are pretty
Fishy mastermind.
Fishy mastermind. We have fun things like the piercer, the roper,
Yeah.
Sloths.
sloths are so strange,
Sloths are really cool.
and a great introduction as well.
They are all strange. If it has aberration on the tin, it's strange.
That's part of the point. Working on this book actually made me fall in love with piercers, because piercers for so long have been sort of like, so
Boring?
it just falls on you.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
A piercer is just a sharp thwomp. If you've played Mario, you've seen a piercer, just a really flat piercer. That's all they are. They're thwomps with points. If you're not in a cave, there's no point in a piercer.
the whole shtick, which is sort of
What
like.
do they do next?
And there's been a considerable amount of ink spilled over. What else is there? Can we make them cooler?
No,
Okay, let's
you
get the
can't.
dark mantle in there to like liven up the life cycle and whatnot. But the piece of art for the piercer in this,
Yeah, it's cool.
where you've got like a small halfling character like spelunking across the ceiling, coming face to one-eyed monstrous face with like a medium-sized significant piercer.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it was just like, oh, these things mean business much more than I've ever given them credit for.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And then,
Yeah,
like
they're
we
still just
mentioned, the
thwomps.
roper is another
Yeah.
one of those things that you typically you can run into in the Underdark, and just kind of the opposite. It just like this towering rock-looking like thing with tentacles that
Yep.
wraps onto you.
And several of the creatures
Far
we
more
talked
dangerous than a
earlier
piercer.
about, some humanoids that are now in the aberration category. Some of these creatures used to be monstrosities
Yep.
and are also now in the aberration category, because a big part of some of the recategorization we did was working to get everyone into sort of the right place for how they fit into the broader story of the D&D multiverse. And so, yeah, we wanted to make it so that like the Roper and the Piercer were a part of that broader aberration horror story. And to also help DMs maybe make a bit more sense of these creatures in their own world building, to imagine, whether using the story prompts we give or stories of their own, ways they can connect these creatures in their stories and in their adventure designs.
The body horror is also kind of built into some of these creatures, like mind flayers, adding a tadpole to someone and they eventually turn into a mind flayer themselves, or having their brain eaten and then they consume those memories. But with sloths, it's very much like, that tadpole gets in them or they are bitten and the disease works its way through you and you will eventually like erupt with a slad tadpole coming out of your chest. And there's a variety of them.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes Slot more than just like, it's like a xenomorph where it does this thing. It's like
xenomorphs.
no, these
That's
are
why they're
creatures
cool.
from a different plane. They're fundamentally magical. So it's not just a matter of biology. It's not just a matter of X happened, then Y, then Z. There's this magical element. The blue slot, the red slot, the green slot, they're the way that they create more of their kind is different each different way and has different results.
And people will find when looking at the Slod stat blocks that we have amped up the otherworldliness of the creatures. You will find that maybe before one of them might have just wielded a mundane longsword. Now instead has a chaos blade where the creature itself doesn't even know what condition their attack is going to deliver. And you will see throughout not only these creatures, but actually many other creatures in the book, particularly otherworldly ones in other creature types, where instead of the mundane weapons that they had before, they now have attacks that really speak to their identity, their place in the multiverse.
Good.
And again, the chaotic abilities of the Slod is just one of many of examples of that style of design approach that we've taken in this book.
All right, let's talk about oozes.
Sloths are one of my favorite aberrations just because they're so cool. And I believe they were monstrosities before, and now they're aberrations, but they're just so cool. They're these tiny little like lizard frog people from a different plane of existence that for the most part they reproduce by putting in tadpoles and people and xenomorphing it, right? And it's cool. The xenomorphing is always cool. The Chaos Blade thing, it sounds really fun. It sounds really cool. They can be difficult, so it's good to be able to give your players loot other than just a simple little long sword that's useless to them that late in the game. So I do love that. I love the changes. I love the new art. They look so cool. So hopefully the Slod gets more use in campaigns from here on out. Once the Monster Manual comes out next month, in a couple weeks actually, I will be writing a whole new campaign start to finish, and I'll probably be starting a Patreon and putting it on there, but we'll see what happens. But it will involve the Slod because the Slod are so cool.
Everyone's favorite squishy things. There's something about oozes that is just horrifying because we have nothing really kind of as similar in our real world, but there's something visceral and terrifying.
Well, even with aberrations, there's usually some structure, something where you can get, I get that. It's got, maybe it has 2 arms and 2 legs.
Right.
Maybe it's got eyeballs, maybe too many, but with oozes, it's sort of the horror of what if it was like an amoeba, but huge? What if it was just hunger, not even form, just hunger?
That's the only thing it feels.
We have talked actually often, if we were rebuilding the game from the ground up, would we even keep this category? Like, would these creatures end up, some of them in, the aberration category, the monstrosity category?
Yeah, they could absolutely
But
fit
for
in
now,
aberrations.
we've got it. And one of the things I love about the ooze category is, despite being a really tiny category of monsters, it looms large because, like, the gelatinous cube
classic.
is so classic. It was heck even in the D&D movie, and in the D&D Lego set, you know, and the number of times people have gone up against, you know, black puddings and gray oozes. It really is way out of scale with how puny this creature type is, and so it's one of the reasons I love that. As we've been leading up to the release of this book, one of the new monsters in the book that no matter who we talk to at conventions, to the press, in videos, internally in the building, anytime we talk about new monsters, almost always the monster people are most excited about is the Blob of Annihilation.
Yeah, I love the Blob of Annihilation.
And so...
and the art is amazing.
And we decided that
cool.
the Blob would get to be the pinnacle of this very small category
cool.
that looms large. And appropriately enough, the Blob looms larger than almost anything in the game. You know, when we talked about it, one of in our earliest meetings about the Blob was we would want even the Tarrasque, if it sees a Blob of Annihilation, to pause and think, do I want to deal with this today?
It's going to be a mess.
I might go to the other side of the planet today and just let it annihilate what it wants to annihilate, and then when it's imploded into the astral sea, then I'll come back.
Yeah, and the Blob of Annihilation feels like a world killer, potentially.
Yes.
Like, it's such a threat.
Yes, and it is, in many ways, it's the concept of the gelatinous cube blown up to a catastrophic scale.
Right.
Because the gelatinous cube, we often, you know, it's a scary creature, but at the same time, it's kind of funny. Like, oh, you know, it's, you know, instead of the marshmallows in the Jell-O mold that was brought to the potluck, oh, it's people. And with the Blob of Annihilation,
Soylent
it's
Green
like
is people.
it's buildings and a whole town of people, and they're slowly dissolving, or not so slowly, and their remains being shunted into another plane of existence. So it is. I think that also gets at a little bit of the scariness of oozes, because they also have like the consistency of something that we all like as kids. Typically, it's like yummy pudding. And it's like, and imagine the pudding or the flan or the tapioca or the Jell-O trying to kill you. That's this creature type.
There's something weirdly charming about gelatinous cube. I don't know why. Like, I always wondered if gelatinous cubes were only square because of dungeons and years of evolution. They were just like, I guess this is our shape now. Just kind of like when you like shake cranberry.
Oh, the cranberry sauce.
The cranberry sauce out, and it just has like the rivets in it. Disgusting. I think everyone has a soft spot for gelatinous cubes.
Yes.
But people often forget, like,
Can
because we always
confirm.
depict it, we have to like add a little bit of green or color to it so you can see it in an illustration. Otherwise, what's the
Well,
point? But like, you fall into this thing on accident.
And then it dissolves you. The experience of going into gelatinous cube is horrifying, despite the number of stuffed animals or action figures or cute little versions of it that exist. Even
I do have a lot of them.
I believe
the
that.
ability to like cutesify truly horrifying creatures, absolutely incredible. But I think that the art for the gelatinous cube in particular does a great job of sort of bringing things back and being like, no, if this thing gets you and you can't, you don't have
done.
the money there to help you get free, your
done.
equipment's going to
It's
be
over.
treasure for the next adventurers to come across it.
There's been a weird utilitarian aspect to gelatinous cubes in every game I've ever played. And some of this is my fault as a DM, but
They're
also
like
as a player.
cleaners.
Yeah, as like they're cleaning the dungeons, or they're the garbage disposal, or I've stuck a vampire in Planescape inside this gelatinous cube to slowly dissolve over time as punishment, knowing that it's regenerating at the same time.
Well, and the gelatinous cube is one of those classic D&D monsters, similar to the owl bear, that for decades has kind of been in the
You can't put the gelatinous cube and the owlbear in the same section, in the same sentence like that. owl bears are beloved because of how cute they are. Gelatinous cubes are beloved because of how terrifying they are. They are not the same, other than they're both iconic. And the gelatinous cube significantly less iconic than the owl bear. Ask anybody who doesn't play D&D if they know what a gelatinous cube is. They'll say no. If you ask them if they know what an owl bear is, more often than not, they'll say yes. Owl bear's far more iconic than the gelatinous cube.
Wizard did it category.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, where did this thing come from? Why is it here?
Yeah.
And speaks in so many wonderful ways to the game's roots, because so much of the game in the early days did take place in dungeons. And so there were monsters like the gelatinous cube that were in many ways created by the dungeon itself. Like the gelatinous cube really is there for, like, because it even looks like a die. It looks like a six-sided die.
Yeah.
Like
it's a cube.
To me, it could
in the
almost
name.
be a mascot. You know, if
No.
we didn't have dragon in the game, in the name of our game, you would almost imagine the gelatinous cube as our mascot, because like it's a die.
I don't think he knows what a
like, grew
mascot
out of,
is.
like dungeons themselves. And also it speaks to the weird magic that has always been in D&D, both in the types of creatures, but also in our spell list. I mean, many of the spells in our player's handbook are bizarre, especially the higher level you get. It's like, and now I'm making a clone out of snow, and I love it. I mean, that's again part of it.
No, Solemnicrum is a weird one.
And
That was wild.
but that gets at part of why D&D is so special, because, you know, on one hand you'll look around and it's like, oh, this is, you know, sort of, you know, classic high fantasy, and it's like, is it? Because did you notice the moving Jello over there, and the you know, the squid-headed thing over there that's going to eat your brain, or, you know, put a tadpole in you.
So often the inspiration for these things are just as likely to be some obscure mythological or legendary thing as it is to be, oh, I forgot my miniatures, so I guess this D4 is now called a Modron.
Right.
I think one of my fun things I did for a player was he was a gelatinous cube farmer.
Oh no.
Just kind of like, you know, just the dark kind of underbelly of like having a pig farmer nearby. You know, bodies kind of get dumped over there to be et. Yeah, so gelatinous cube farmer was like a shady kind of guy who's like, you know, if you've got a spare body, I know I have a farm. Gelatinous cubes just wandering around in squares.
Creepy.
Wow.
Sorry.
Wow.
I'm adding too much to the conversation. Why are they so bad at lying?
I feel like my brain is about to be dissolved right now.
Yeah, you can see right through them.
Oh my God.
I don't know who told him he's allowed to tell jokes, but he's not. He needs to stop. He's bad at it. I don't think they're going to say anything in the next 2 minutes and 5 seconds, and I'm so legitimately afraid that he's going to try and tell more really bad jokes. So that's where the reaction's going to stop. Oh my God. Yeah, so they talked about a fair amount of aberrations. I'm certain not anywhere even close to like half of them. And the majority of the ones they talked about were like related to the Illithid, which is cool. The Illithid is the most well-known aberration. They're really cool. The Slod, really cool. The Beholders and the Beholder families, cool. The Death Tyrant being an undead is still, believe it or not, part of the Beholder family, so to speak. It's just a dead Beholder, which is still cool. It makes sense that it's in the undead and not the aberrations, but it is still cool. And then going into the oozes, the gelatinous cube is the most well-known ooze. It's still not very well known outside of the Dungeons and Dragons community, but it's still really cool. And yeah, it for those of you who didn't know, because of pictures and the movie, it is supposed to be a clear gelatinous cube. The only thing you can really see in it are the things that haven't finished dissolving yet. It makes it a little bit more dangerous, makes it a little bit more likely that you'll fall into it or walk into it, what have you. And that is something that a lot of DMs, forget about, and they always describe it as this light blue cube, because that's what the monster manual shows it as. But that's not the case. It is in fact supposed to be clear. But whatever color you want it to be, it's up to you. It doesn't really matter. I do I do like the sounds of a lot of the changes that they're making. Some things I think are irrelevant, like moving the Gith into the aberrations that didn't need to be done. I don't agree with it, but whatever. It doesn't affect anything, so who cares, right? Bringing in some new Gith Yankees and some new Gith Sarai is definitely amazing. It's great. It's definitely something that can be used in campaigns, either as allies or adversaries. It doesn't matter. But that was really cool. I loved the majority of the changes. I'm looking forward to the next video they put out, and I'm even more looking forward to the monster manual itself. I'm starting to get a little sick, so I don't know when my next video is going to be, but I'm dosing my medicine as best as I can to get better as quickly as possible. If there's a reaction, if there's a video you want me to react to, if you want to watch with me, let me know in the comments below. If you disagree with anything I said, let's have a conversation in the comments below. But as always, thanks for watching.